You know, I got to say, by the third record, Joyous was the third one, right?
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah. I felt like I was really hearing a lot of more influences in the sound at that point. First off, especially from, you know, the second record on and As You Went, the Pleasure sound stood out from, you know, the funk R&B pack, if you will, because, I mean, it's a little hard for me to describe it, but you guys did not just fall into like the cliches, and, you know, it was serious funk, but it had nuances and it had elements that you might not expect, and little turns and twists that kept it really interesting for the listener. It made it a little harder sometimes, I think, to have the massive hits, but, you know, for those that were willing to listen and go a little deeper, the rewards were there. And on the Joyous record, I mean, you know, I heard influences coming through like, you know, definitely Larry Graham in Nate's,
Yes,
you know, progression.
Absolutely.
Yes.
No question about it.
Yes.
Well, even the title, well, the Dance to the Music, even the title of that one is kind of a throwback to you were saying how before, when you were talking, Michael, and you're saying you're trying to learn Dance to the Music, you meant the original Sly Stone track, right? Not this one that's on Joyous.
Right.
Yeah.
That's right.
So here it is all these years later, and you guys did another tune with that name.
Absolutely.
But I mean, just a variety too, from Sassafras Girl to the Dance to the Music to Can't Turn You Loose. Serious bass-driven funk there.
Yeah, that's another Donald Hepburn special.
That's an Hepburn special, yeah. And that's the musical freedom that Wayne unleashed upon us.
Yes.
Go for it.
He unleashed it.
He unleashed
He
us.
said, release the Kraken.
He did, man. So we just went for it. You
And
know,
I definitely heard on the instrumentals, like some Headhunters influence.
Yes, very
Oh,
much
of
so.
course.
Yeah.
Of course.
And I do want to say to you, that's what Nate and Bruce really brought to us, is because Nate more than Bruce, but Bruce got around a little bit with Wayne doing some sessions for the first go around, and they met Harvey Mason, they met George Benson, they met all these people, and so they'd be like talking about how he played this and how he played that. So when you say you can hear that Headhunter influence of Harvey, or you can hear Larry Graham, they knew these people. I don't know if you saw Nate's post on Facebook where he's like got his arm around Ron, Sly Stone's bass player. I mean, it's just, I'm telling you, these are the guys who got out into the world. They partnered and played and lived with the realities of all of these great people who have influenced not just us, but influenced the world, changed the world with their innovation. And then they brought it back. And that's why I'm saying to you, this isn't personal about anything about, this is about the people who wanted us to go forward. They wanted to nurture us like an organism to thrive and go forward. And that's what my life has been all about. That's why I'm who I am today.
There you go. And all those influences that we happen to melt into the pleasure situation, especially on Joyous. I mean, I remember meeting Harvey through a session that I did with Bobby Lyle.
There you go, the Genie.
The Genie. Yeah, there's a Genie. There was a record called New Warrior, and Harvey was just brilliant, just the nicest guy. And watching him perform in the studio and just hearing just seeing the human side of him, it was just really, really enlightening and amazing to watch. So, of course, in our conversation, I had to ask him about the Headhunters record. I had to say, man, that record, man, it was so great, man. So of course, I'm learning every note on it, of course. And me and Bruce were listening to it. I was like, wow, we're jamming to it. And Harvey's like, yeah, man, it was all right, man. I said, wait a minute, what do you mean it was all right?
Yeah.
But this is what I think Harvey meant. Harvey was such a great guy. He never, I don't think he ever was satisfied with some of his stuff. I mean, I think he was always searching to be better. And I think when he said that to me, I caught him at a moment when he was saying, I could have played this better, I could have played that better. But the thing is, when you listen to those records, I mean, they are milestones. They are brilliant. His performance is brilliant. I mean, he made, I think he might have been worried about tempo on something. Who knows? Who cares? Because, if you look at Chameleon, when that started, it started one tempo and it ended another tempo. But that was the beauty of it.
It was.
That was the beauty of it. It started one way, and the energy and the love and just the whole vibe of the whole band, and they all went there together. It wasn't like he was dragging or pulling anybody behind, So all those are the stories and the influence that helped me, broaden my thought of writing and being a musician, especially in terms of going and playing for other artists. It's a whole other thing. When I'm playing pleasure music, it's one thing because it's like this is me, it's what I do. But when you're trying to go in there and play somebody's stuff you have never heard before, and you're trying to interpret it the way they want to hear it, you got to get it just like that. I mean, you need all the mental information you can get to try to get it right.
Well, who is mainly responsible for the arrangements through those early records for Pleasure?
Well, okay. So I get to first say what I did do, and then I get my one sentence rant. So what I did do was, I would be the person who would do the vocal arrangements. Dan Brewster did horn arrangement, and believe it or not, orchestral arrangement. That Joyous, that's his.
That's Dan.
And he got to stand up there and conduct an orchestra in a major session in Hollywood. Okay, this is stuff that it's like, these are the unknown stories of Pleasure. People think that that's people got get a title of producer and it means they got everything done, and that's just not the case at all. I mean, we were self-contained, and we weren't. At first, Wayne had every reason to wonder what we could or couldn't do, and to do things by the book. He was beholden to fantasy. However, he was blown away when Dan showed him the orchestra. Well, let's do it.
Yeah, I mean,
ballad is status right there.
I mean, Dan walks in with it all written out.
Funny, yeah. I would never have been able to transcribe big band music. The first big band chart I transcribed was Quincy Jones' Stockholm Sweetening, and it actually won me Quincy Jones's autograph. Okay, but I wouldn't have known how to transcribe them, what the different clefs are, and the different transpositions for all the different horns, if Dan hadn't have taught me, and if we hadn't been friends from grade school. I mean, that's how this worked. That's what Pleasure is really about. That's the true story of why we're educated, why we know what we were doing. And we convinced Wayne, and Wayne gave us credibility, and he allowed us to validate ourselves. So
absolutely.
We would have to come up with vocal harmonies. Okay, I would do that. Whatever we would be called upon for the moment to make a song happen, okay, I'll figure it out. That's really how it worked.
That's how it works.
Often I'd be trying to figure it out, and somebody would answer back, oh, but more like this. And then there would be this very collaborative aspect of it, because we've been that way from childhood. I mean, we're just like a club, really, a clubhouse of boys, and this is how we did everything. But I can tell you, my biggest I don't know, I'll just say it, kind of mentoring moment for the sound and the identity of Pleasure was when Nate and Doug brought Universal. Do you know that tune?
Which record is that one on?
That's on Future Now. It's the second song. Well, technically it's the third song you hear, but is it
Third song, yeah. Yeah, it's a funky one, yeah.
Well, no one knew what to do with it vocally. And Bruce Smith had some lyrics, and they were different and kind of colorful, and no one knew what to do with it. And so I said, okay, let me go out there and let me just try to start, and I wouldn't have said it this way back then, but sculpt some kind of vocal approach to this like incredibly innovative song. With like nobody heard anything like it before. And then I went out there and just like did it. It was like, I'm reading these words, I'm singing what I would hear somebody singing that's funky with this, and we actually just innovated a sound that became pleasure. You cannot compare it to Joyce. You cannot compare it to Get to the Feeling. You cannot compare it to Midnight at the Oasis. It's what Nate brought, and it started a whole new direction. Nate's gonna talk.
Let me interject. Thank you, Michael.
Shut up, Michael.
Yeah, see, Nate has a writing credit on that one.
Check it out.
Zip it.
And I know we're jumping forward to the future now, Rick. I just want to say something about Universal. If you listen to the intro, a couple of bars with the horns are doing their thing, and you hear Michael underneath saying, "I can do my thing underwater," he's looking at the lyrics and laughing, looking at them because he's trying to figure out what to do. You know, so
that's right.
That's a little tidbit. So we're like, then he goes, "I can do my thing underwater." That's what that's about, and we left it. Michael's absolutely right. That's the way we used to do things. We used to we did it collaboratively. We just kind of just figured it out as we went along. You know. Anyway, go ahead, Michael. I'm listening and enjoying myself.
Well, I think we got through the music, but I want to ask, when did you guys first go out on the road after you got your record deal?
Well, I know the first time that I went with the band on the road, which is 1975. And I remember we played the Child Herald in Washington, D.C.
Right.
And we just kind of crawled our way across the country, one place after the other. That's how we did it. But I would say it was Let's Dance was the hit.
Right.
And Ghettos of the Mind. And people loved Ghettos of the Mind. That's another Donald Hepburn special.
Donald Hepburn, there you go.
Ghettos of the Mind with Oscar Bashir playing that solo.
That's right.
And we didn't have a trumpet player.
Right, we were thinking about that. Okay, we got this trumpet on here. How are we going to
do it on the synth, or what'd you do for that?
Oh, no. There were no synthesizers in 1975. There are no portable synthesizers that you could take. No mini move. But anyway,
what did we do for
live? If there was, we couldn't afford it. I can guarantee you that. But I guess it was an ARP string ensemble. I think I had an ARP string ensemble back then.
And you had a clavinet.
And a clav, yeah.
And
you had some toys.
And you might have just got that Echoplex too that you were going crazy.
Yes, Mr. Goldfine. He said, boys. Yes.
No, I said you had some toys.
We're like in Mr. Goldfine's class. And we've been back in the back talking and slapping and telling jokes. Okay.
Spit out that gum.
Exactly.
Right.
Either repeat question or next question. So when you went out on that first tour, was it just you guys playing small clubs, or did you share a bill with any other acts at that point?
I don't think we did a lot of sharing. I know we, like I said, Child Herald, and then there was this club in Baltimore. Nathaniel, do you remember that? And we also played a show that was like a very local, in Baltimore, a local version of Soul Train, and we got to play Let's Dance. We may have played Ghettos of the Mind, but it was actually a little televised show.
Yeah. What was the name of that club, dude? Oh.
Yeah, I don't know, but that was like a funky little club.
Is that the place? That's not the time when we played with Bill Withers, is it?
No, but I'm glad you mentioned that. That was Paul's Mall.
Paul's Mall.
We also played Paul's Mall, and so that was one of the few concerts. I mean, few club gigs that we played. We opened for Bill Withers.
Wow, he was in his peak then.
And that was fantastic because he was not having the best night personally, but his band and he got down. But Use Me was the hit.
Oh, he was
Use
killing
Me
it.
and all of that stuff was And by the way, because Nate was talking about Harvey, isn't that Harvey on that record?
I think that might be Mr. Gatson, I believe.
Okay,
James Gatson. Yeah.
Because that drumming is incredible on that record.
You're talking about James Gatson. That's Watch on the Thirsty Rhythm Band, Dyke and the Blazers, and countless other sessions. Yes.
Better stop it. Yeah, we used to play Dyke and the Blazers when we were the Soul Masters. Absolutely.
Yes, we did. Yeah. We used to play.
Yes, we did.
Let a Woman Be a Woman.
Yes, and let a man be a man.
Sure did. We covered all that.
Yeah.
So what were the pleasure shows like? A couple of records in, when you were more in your own thing, what were the shows like? And did you go out on any of the big? I think we mentioned earlier, we were talking, Nate, off the air about that was it Isley's and Graham show?
Right, the Forum.
Yeah.
Well,
how many of those types of shows did you guys do?
Here's how I remember. It's funny you're talking about this as if we should be able to just dial up 30 years ago and just I was right here on the corner of 6th and Jonathan, and that's not possible. But here's how I recall it. We did the kind of club dates that we just described until our then manager got us a tour with KC and the Sunshine Band. And that tour was a gigantic, major tour.
Now, was that during Joyous? Was that during the Joyous record? Or was it?
Yes, it was. Yes, it was. Yes, it was. And that's 1976. And 1976 and or 77.
Right.
But you know how big Casey and the Sunshine Band was.
Yeah, Get Down Tonight, That's the Way, all that was out then.
Gigantic venues. And we were truly not really prepared for that kind of level of concert, but we learned so much and grew into having a sound that was worthy of those halls. We always were a very powerful and dynamic group. That's what you could hear. But if you listen to the difference in how Joyous sounds and the difference to how Celebrate the Good Thing sounds, we learned so much about how to make an impact from how we played on tours like KC, because that band would roar like a lion each and every single night. I mean, you would hear That's the Way I Like It, Get Down Tonight. I mean, I'm serious.
Strong, very strong.
Oh my God.
Plus you knew what to do as a frontman too.
Oh yes. Yeah. Mm-hmm. But that's a horn section to bar none.
Yes.
KC's horn section, that's a horn section bar none. I'm not sure. I think they may have been out of Tallahassee. They may have been out of FSU. I don't remember. But they were an unbelievable band.
Well, yeah, I don't know. TK Records was in Florida, but I'm not sure where they came from.
Right.
So did you guys, were you very comfortable on stage, or did you prefer the studio?
Oh my God, we're players, so we enjoyed live playing. There was never any. Yeah, we were live players before we ever did anything in the studio. And when we did our little demo tape, that was like, we had no idea, what we really were doing. We had no production skills until Wayne. I think that it's fair to say that Wayne really took Marlon under his wing in terms of developing production skills. But, because we're so organized in terms of arranging and in terms of understanding what a true manicured composition should be conceptually, not talking about just does it sound right, but actually understanding, what parts should be where they should be in terms of not the pure audio spectrum, as you would say, like as an engineer, but what they should be as a composition. Where should the strings be? Where should the horns be? Where should the vocals be? Where should the lead vocal be? I mean, is this baritone vocal? Is this, if for instance, you can look at what song was that? I don't really remember the name because I don't like it so much, and everybody else likes it. That ballad that I did, Farewell,
Goodbye.
Farewell, Goodbye.
Yeah,
Farewell,
off
Goodbye is the one and only
Get to the
tune
Feeling.
that I sang baritone. It's like, because baritone is what it should be. It's like, we understand composition from the ground up. I mean, like, academically, not like just experientially, or just kind of doing it till you fake it till you make it. I mean, these things were studied and these things were learned and they're understood.
So I gotta ask Nate, is Michael a perfectionist?
Yes, but he's a passionate perfectionist. He's smart enough to realize that there are imperfections that are just as good as things that are perfect.
I'm glad. Thank you for bringing that back into the semblance of not being a dictator or something like that.
Well, some things that happen. For a prime example, let's talk about the song you don't like. That song, the ballad, man. We were crying in the studio, and we were. When we were playing that song back, we were all crying when those strings went down on that. Now I know what you feel weird about, because you did a demo vocal on that, and once again you had a piece of paper in your hand and you were singing. You're singing it and you're singing it and singing it and singing it. We got through. I think the following day we were going to do a real vocal version of it. And for some reason, it didn't work out. We were all, well, it's not sounding good. I turned to Wayne and said, Wayne, what's wrong with the one that he did yesterday? Wayne, listen. Hold on a minute. Push the button. We listened to his demo, and Wayne said, yeah, let's just use a demo. So I get it. I mean, I thought you did a great job. That vocal is great, man. It's killer. You wrote a beautiful song, man. So it's just one of those things, man.
That's a very good example.
Check it out.
There you go, Scott. That's the answer to one of your questions earlier about, things that you don't necessarily want, but that you live with. Because honestly, I mean, clearly the performance was there, but I actually just think, for me, being the person who would like emote like that and having them, it's just, it certainly is not the flash power and brilliance of what Pleasure is really truly like known for.
But know what?
Me, that was a lot of exposure to do something like that.
It was a lot of exposure, but that's the beauty of it being raw like that, because I still get letters from people saying they've used that song at their wedding, or not wedding, but their funerals. That's a big deal.
That's a big deal.
Well, it's like a lot of people don't like to hear themselves talk. Actors don't want to see themselves act.
Yeah.
We don't like photos of ourselves that other people like. Right. So critical of ourselves.
Touche.
Yeah. On that Get to the Feeling record, though, I wanted to mention Thanks for Everything. Real Kool the Gang influence on that, isn't there?
Yes.
Yeah. In a good way.
And I mean, and that's
no shame in that either.
With Wayne, come on everybody, let's do it. There's like him and my brother, and I tell you what, that's a bass track performance for the ages. What Nate did on that, him and Bruce Carter. Phillips, there are so many incredible moments. That's a great song. Great recording.
We were so wound up recording that record, boy. I mean, and we were so excited. I mean, you can feel the energy in that thing, boy, because, man, I listen to it now. It's like, man, I have the regret, too. It's like, oh, man, wish I could have played that a little bit different.
Yeah.
It's like, oh, I did that right there. Me and Bruce, after we do every take, me and Bruce are always outside somewhere in another room talking about it. Bruce would be like, man, I don't know. Bruce was, half the time, he wasn't happy with his takes. I have to tell you, he wasn't happy, but he always wanted to keep going and keep doing it over and over and over again. And so, of course, in a band situation, man, it goes to a vote. it goes to the vote, man. Our producer will say, "Hey, man, that's cool," or the guys in the band say, "Man, it's all right, man, it's cool." So of course we just let it go. So, you know, I think I think even Bruce, if Bruce were here, bless his heart, he would probably say, "Man, I wish I could have done that over again." We can go on the line, and he'd be at least probably 30% of the stuff that he's done on Raised. I wish I could do that. I wish I could do that over.
Yeah.
Well, let me ask you now. So through Get to the Feeling, pre-Future Now, how did you guys feel about the commercial success that you had? You know, was it something that was prominent on your minds, or were you just feeling good about what you've created? How did that balance work for both of you?
Well, I'll say it this way. I think the band definitely had a hunger and an appetite to achieve more. I think that's fair to say. You know, we felt that we were continuing to make progress. I don't feel like we had the growth from Get to the Feeling that we wanted to have from after Joyous. I think that we felt like we needed to be more ambitious, but I don't think we knew where it was going to come from. And I know nobody saw it coming from Space is the Place, Universal, and Glide. And I really can't remember, Nate. Was Spread That Feeling, is that on Special Things or Future?
That's on Special Things, yeah.
Okay. But we didn't see, you know, because Nate brought those tunes into the studio while we were making the record. And we had not, you know, he had not introduced them to us, he and Doug. And that's when Doug came to the band, was during Future Now.
Right.
Look back at that lineup, no Doug on Get to the Feeling,
no
Doug on Joyous, no Doug on Dust Yourself Off.
And you know what's interesting about that transition between Get to the Feeling and Future Now, and I think Michael, you and I, we talked about there are a few songs on there that I have to say personally, I was like, I don't know, man. I felt we were in our quest to be popular and to be successful. Yep. I think we might have we started leaning towards trying to sound like other people on a couple of songs.
Totally.
And so I'm like thinking, I'm like, oh my God, we are not these guys. We are not these guys. We are pleasure. We got to figure it out.
Yeah, and so, I'm not gonna. Yeah, I'm not gonna overspeak that because Nate just said it perfectly. But I will say this: when you listen to Get to the Feeling, you hear what I referenced with you, Scott, earlier about being formalistic. I mean, like getting to where there are actually, people have these formalistic, stylistic kind of packagings that they get into. When you hear it, you go, "Oh, that's so and so," and I believe that with Wayne, we began not just from him, but we began to look for that.
Right.
And I think that's exactly what Nate is referring to.
Yeah, without missing any names of who we were going towards the sound.
But the point of it is just that is far less ambitious as Dust Yourself Off. I'm talking about the music you hear on Dust Yourself Off, the compositions you hear, the arrangements you hear. I mean, there's a lot of safeness in a lot of those tunes on Get to the Feeling, except for Celebrate the Good Thing.
No matter what. And
yes.
Well, even in some of the names like Foxy Lady and Ladies Night Out, I mean, they're just kind of generic. Everyone had songs called those.
Now,
even though I love Foxy Lady.
And the wonderful thing about that, Scott, is for us to get the confirmation from you, a musicologist, someone who knows the history of funk, someone who also understands music as a musicologist, what it is we're talking about. You can't listen to Dust Yourself Off or accept. You can't listen to Let's Dance and talk about formalistic.
No,
The
we
song.
won't.
I'm not talking about the whole record. Just look at just Let's Dance as just a concept. There's nothing formalistic about it.
It didn't sound like
And
anybody
so,
else. That was the key.
you know,
But I think
a
it's
soprano
important.
sax solo like Wayne Shorter in the middle of a dance tune? No, that's not formalistic. So I'm just trying to give you a sense of the sharp contrast, the juxtaposition of the point that you yourself were able to just draw about Get to the Feeling. And so I'm just pointing this out again. I just saying.
Great
I
record.
just saying.
Great record.
That's Wayne's last record.
But
That's
I think
Wayne's last record. That's the swan song. And then Future Now.
I want to just, I know, Nate, you can speak just a second. I just want to interject. People, fans that weren't there at the time, you got to realize this was the height of funk, jazz, R&B, and there were so many other groups out there, so many of them having their own sounds. To find your lane and find that unique space was not easy.
Right.
It was a challenge, you know. So you definitely had to elevate your game.
So perfectly said.
Very well said, man.
About the industry at that moment. That is you clearly know the industry as a collective consciousness in that moment, Scott. That's precise.
And notwithstanding the songs like No Matter What and celebrating some of those classic pleasure things, I would walk out of the studio on some of those sessions during Get to the Feeling thinking, okay, we are not this band. Why are we trying to sound like this band? So in the back of my mind, I knew that whatever happened in the future, we better get back to being original. We better come out with some stuff that's going to be that's going to establish us. It's going to make us sound like us.
Well,
by that same token, was there anyone else out there at that time that were sort of your peers that you guys were like, wow, these guys are hopping off, like a Slave or anybody?
Yeah, man.
Are you kidding me?
Slave, come on, man.
All of it came out. All of it came out. Like, yeah, you got to be. I mean,
that's the problem.
We enjoyed everybody who was out there, and I really don't want to get too deep into Funkadelic Parliament, but oh my God, man. I mean.
We live with Knee Deep on the road for like a 2 summers. Every time we got on the bus on the road, we put on Knee Deep.
I'm telling you.
And so we were once again at that stage. We were still very involved in listening to other artists and loving what other people did. I think it got to a point where in terms of like the formula thing, we got inspired by it, and that was the danger of it all.
Yeah,
the key is to enjoy other acts, but still try to keep your own find your own space.
As opposed to like the Barcades that somehow assimilated it all.
Nate, you know what you connecting that dot to is at that time, Scott, we started touring with the Barcades, and if you listen to the records, the Barcade, yes, you nod your head widely there. I see a good nod there, go up and down, because they were beginning to get formalistic themselves.
Well, they were like an assimilation group at that point.
That's exactly right.
You know what?
Go ahead, Nate.
I give them a pass. I know those guys. I mean, I didn't know them personally then, but I had to look at the history of the Barcades. I love those guys dearly.
Absolutely.
Those guys go way back. So I mean, bless them for keeping a career going, man. Sometimes you gotta do what you gotta do.
I'm just trying to point out that we weren't the only ones putting ourselves in boxes, and we were around people who had a much bigger, more depth discography and a much bigger, wider name recognition who were doing it. And everybody was trying to do it. Think about when Kool and the Gang came back with Jungle Boogie. I mean, think about all the different ways that a lot of different groups tried to remake themselves. Some successful, some not. But Scott, you pointed it out. It was a collective consciousness. We weren't alone in this search for identity. Everybody, many people, many groups had it. The Earth, Wind, and Fire of need of love is a different Earth, Wind, and Fire when you start talking about evil, or when you finally get to devotion. There's a different Earth, Wind, and Fire. And so people trying to find themselves, we understand we were right there in it, and you're pointing it out that that's how deep we were in it. And we were young, and we were capable of being influenced on what should be happening and what to do. So you're making a great point.
You're making a very good point. And at that time in the music business, like you said, there was a lot of bands. At that point, there were a ton of bands, and everybody was vying for their space. And sometimes, sometimes it was maybe pressure from a label. Who knows? Being our guy, we want a song like this. We want a song like.
You guys resisted disco, so that's a huge.
Man, well,
no, we didn't.
For
the most part. Ivory. Come on, Nate. Black Ivory.
Black Ivory. We sure did.
Big Apple Rock.
We sure
See,
did.
I got some obscure stuff for you, Scott.
I forgot about that.
Look at Black Ivory, Big Apple Rock.
Yes, we did.
Well, for the most part.
Ivory, you and I have an understanding.
Yeah, well,
that was them, but then somebody tried to break them back to disco.
Exactly. Well, that was the era then. That was the labels were pushing for that, and I think we escaped that
did.
one, because once Future Now, Get the Feeling had run its course, then we went into Future Now, and I think it just feels like we kind of knew that we had to do something with that kind of tempo thing, with that kind of beat.
Yes.
But
exactly.
It still had to be us. So once again, Mr. Donald Hepburn, Donald, or I guess you guys collaborate on that. You guys came in with the real thing.
Real thing, definitely.
Real thing, which is an up-tempo thing.
Yeah, and that's Donald. But honestly, how that record got fleshed out, how Real Thing got fleshed out is so amazing, because that tune, you point to Donald, but if you hadn't have done that that bass thing, that was in my opinion, that's some innovative bass work. The horn section, I did some good stuff, but
Marlon did some great guitar work. I think for me on that bass part, there was a synth bass there, I think, or was it? I might have done a basic track.
Right, you did. Then you did. I think that's a Mutron thing. It's some kind of.
Yeah, it's one of the few times when Mutron worked.
Yep, it's fantastic.
It worked on that session.
Yeah,
but then I did the overdubs. I think I did the overdub. I didn't know what to do, so then at that point there was. I don't even know if we had horns on it when I did my part. But I just started.
I don't think we did. I don't think we did, because the horn section was one day and one day only for everything on Future Now.
Right.
Well, I always thought it definitely had a more distinctive signature kind of sound to it. The whole project. It was also more consistent thematically.
Yes, it was almost a concept album. Almost.
Yeah.
Almost.
Better vocals.
We know who's responsible for that. Phil Caff.
Phil was great.
That's the difference between all the records of the past and Future Now and Special Things. Is Phil Caffel became our engineer, and not only was he great as a very young engineer, but he was so successful in developing a great pleasure sound that for the next record, we got to do that record in Fantasy Studio D, which had the synced up 24-track Studers for 48 tracks and a Neve automated board.
One of the first Neve boards.
You graduated.
We graduated.
Yes, we did.
We graduated.
But because Future Now was such a successful project and record.
Yeah, it's just it was a maturity thing for us too. We had grown. That was our first record on our own that we produced ourselves.
Yes.
Yes. The confidence level was high. The competition was high.
How did Wayne get out of the picture for that?
We asked him.
Just
yeah. We just asked him.
There was nothing more than that. You know, I mean, there was. You
don't get it if you don't ask.
There was some drama. I mean, it's not like
right.
Yeah, it's not. There wasn't some drama, but there wasn't drama like, oh, I'm gonna hate you forever. We kept a relationship with him. It was wonderful, and you know, that was that. But I think if you're asking if there was any reason to dispute whether the band was ready to make their own record, we would, if there had been any needed necessity for a debate among ourselves, we would have had it. But we knew that we were. I mean, that was, we had made most of the records we made them by like, okay, we have this tune. Like, that's why Nate has been saying Wayne was so gracious and so fantastic. And that's why I say he was as a really healthy father figure. Because if we presented something to him that was intact, professional, sound, and valid, Wayne would go, yeah, man. Yeah, let's do it. I mean, that's just the way, and so, you know, we knew we had been virtually like making these records. What it was that we really needed to do was be able to have our own say in every aspect of it, the content, all of it. You know,
I got to get deeper on Glide, because that's one of the seminal tracks of that decade, of that era of golden era of funk is Glide. And you know, I mean, every true funketeer shares my enthusiasm for that track. And when I first heard it, I was in high school at the time. I mean, it's just one of those that you just hear that first time and just like, I mean, you got to make that funk face right away. You can't help it, you know?
Yeah.
Well, I tell you what, dude.
How was it created? Tell us how that was created.
Well, I was. I don't know if we were planning on rehearsing for that record. I made a trip to Portland. I was living in LA at the time, and the only place I could stay was at my mom's house. I could have got a hotel, but hey, I hadn't seen my mom for a while, so I figured I'd stay there with her. And I was upstairs in the room upstairs, and the idea just popped in. It just came up. I was practicing, and I've always loved working with Tenth because I love Ron Carter. He used to do it all the time. I love Ron Carter. So you know, the whole idea just came up. Just like the little cadence. It kind of, I wrote it like about a couple of minutes, you know, and that's where it all started. I brought it into the band. I don't know if did we rehearse it, Mike? I don't even know if we rehearsed it.
No.
So
I mean, like, you may needed to really just kind of point out, like, working it out with Bruce, but I can tell you,
right,
sort of like you came with Doug. Doug, like, we were started working on the record before Doug came down, but you had arranged for Doug to come down.
Right.
Doug flew in. We picked up Doug. We brought Doug, and this is how I recall it. And again, I don't like how many years ago is Glide, so you don't expect this to be some real accurate depiction of what happened. But Doug comes into the studio, and there's hugs and talks, and you know, man, it's so great to have you. This is fantastic. And Doug sets up, and you guys do Space is the Place,
right?
And we're all just like completely like, we're like, whoa, like what, you know? And we're all so inspired. It's like, okay, I want to do a collab with a wah wah. We hadn't done it before, but you know, I'd heard enough wah wah with Sly and stuff that I just love, like Frisky and all that kind of stuff. Was like, oh, I'm just going to add to this in a really cool way and stay out the way, you know? And that's why even with the horn parts, we just like, it's like, stay out of the way. This is a smash, and whether or not it's a single, we do not care. This is the way that we want people to understand who pleasure is. The next tune is Universal. And we were like, oh my God, what can't they do? What can't they do?
And then we got to Glide, I think.
We got to Glide. And by that time, we were just like, we knew it was going to be incredible, and it was like, oh my God.
Well, we ran it down a couple of times, and I don't know if we even used a drum machine, or we might have just to see if we can play along with it. I don't know if Bruce was excited about it, but we did it anyway. I think he grew to love it, actually. And we laid the track down, and we all came back into the control room. We were listening, and we're listening. Phil turned the volume up. We're listening. We were like, oh man, wow.
Yeah.
Because it sounded different on the headphones than it did on the playback. Phil got such a great bass sound, and drums were killing. And we were like, it was like 13 minutes long. I don't know how long it was. It was long.
It was fantastic.
So by the time we got to the end of the song, everybody in the control room, everybody's head was like. So yeah. I guess I felt good because I said, okay, this is probably. I wasn't even sure it was going to make the record, but I said, hey man, if people are grouped on like this, something's got to happen with it.
I remember the excitement that I felt when I realized that there was space for me to do some significant roads work.
Yes.
Because it's not like our stuff really presented a lot of that, although there was always, ballads and mid-tempo-y stuff like Ladies Night Out. You could, and I had felt like I had really made a signature with a tune called Thoughts of Old Flame. I thought that I had done a Rhodes track that for us was like, okay, everybody's going to hear this, and they're going to know, like, Jesus, Pleasure's got, like, don't say Michael can't play anymore. And I realized, wow, I'm going to get to be able to do some really cool stuff with the chord progression. And Nate and I just sat there, and he every time he just go, yeah, man. And because it was his conception, is his idea, and he's going, yeah, man. I
was just yes, man.
We're just feeding off of each other, and I'm just like, oh, okay. So I'm, and so based on just that little triad walk up with a couple of signature stabs with nines, ninth chords with nines, right. It was just like so dramatic, cool, but it developed the track and it stayed out of the way.
It's a perfect record. All those elements add to the whole perfectly.
Yeah.
Thank you. And then when you talk about the foundation of that, Bruce Carter, man, he laid that out. And I was like,
my God.
I remember seeing him when we were laying that down. He was behind the little things, the sound barriers, and you see his little head sticking up. But man, he was laying that stuff out, and he had a smile on his face because I knew he felt good about that song.
You mentioned listening to Knee Deep, which is like 15 minutes long on the tour bus and all that. Right. That's a track you never wanted to end. Glide is another one you never want that groove to end.
Wow.
Well, thank you very much, Scott.
For saying that.
And I will say this, similarly to how most of us agree that Glide is really truly the anthem for pleasure, for what it represents. We learned that Questlove put together a playlist for Michelle Obama's book tour, and Glide is on volume 1 of that playlist. And for us to have a strong sense of how well we have become established in sort of just the kind of hall of good historic R&B funk tunes, we just want to perpetuate that. We don't want to let that down. That set a particular standard of quality not of licks, not of phrases, not of, oh, we're going to play this the same way, not of formula, but rather we're going to push ourselves every single time. And so, when I read what you sent to Nate about Now Is the Time, and said that you were impressed, it really helps us, because that kind of confirmation, that's how we're going to keep going for it. We don't want to rest on any laurels of any kind. It's all about learning, growing, and continuing.
Absolutely. We'll jump on that in just a minute. Before leaving Future Now, I know Jeff Lorber was somehow involved on that.
Jeff Lorber brought a Prophet synthesizer because I didn't have one. And he has a what do you call it? A credit for synthesizer programming. But Glide is actually, it's just a preset. Glide, all you got to do is adjust literally the glide knob on the Prophet. So there was no programming involved, and I don't believe he played anything, but he did provide the synthesizer.
All right.
I remember him hanging out a lot around on
Nothing to It.
Nothing to It. Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, yeah. I think you were there, Donald. I think all you guys are like surrounding the keyboard, and I kept seeing all these hands going. These hands are jumping on different parts when you guys were recording it.
Yeah, that's a slick track too. That one.
Yeah, and that's I just hooked up a wah-wah. There may have been some tweaks, but even that you can hear it's just a regular good old sawtooth. Nice bitey sawtooth wave patch. I mean, let me put it this way. Only out of all of that, only real thing involved like much tweaking, if anything. But even Real Thing, if you really listen to it, it's just a lot of portamento, and I think that's kind of a pulse wave thing. When you listen to it, the swoop down, the drop down, but I did that, and I'm pretty sure I was like alone when I came up with it. But and again, I just can't tell you enough about the influences that I have had from Tim Gorman. If it wasn't for Tim Gorman, I wouldn't be a synthesizer player. I wouldn't have a good sense of what good synth sounds should be. But Jeff did provide the Prophet, and he was definitely there a lot. And I will say this: if you think back and you look at the time frame, Marlon was producing Jeff's very first 2 records right at that moment.
Yeah, well, he's like a Pacific Northwest brother, Jeff Lorber.
Yeah, exactly.
From Philadelphia. He
originally, but
from Philadelphia. That's right, but that is right.
Yeah, Jeff was a big fan of it. We love Jeff. Jeff was a big fan of the band too.
Pleasure fan.
He's been a cheerleader for years, man.
He's been sending us mostly Nate, but he's been sending us some iterations of Joyous recently, where he's just soloing through it. I mean, he's just soloing through it. He just like giving it all he got, kind of. Yeah. He's a pleasure fan for sure.
Just one more curiosity about Glide for me, and it's that synth part that comes in that has returned. Was that influenced by at all by Summer Madness?
Yeah.
Oh, with the portamento thing.
3-octave rise. Yeah. 3-octave rise. Definitely. Yep. But it's an answer. It's a call and response to the glides, to the background vocals. It just made sense, and it's just a nice way to segue up. But exactly, yeah. And I think you think about that. That's that kind of worm-like, because that really wasn't a worm. You know what I mean when I say worm? Something that sticks with you? No, people think of it that way. They think of it as a hook. There's a particular synth sound that's usually pulse wave based, that's very high pitched, that like always kind of sails over everything, and it's now a customary term for it is worm. and but this was just a way for us to kind of get that laser finish sound in it. It just has that zzz, it just has sizzle, and it's just that little kind of, and that's another hallmark of our sound. You're always going to hear some kind of synthesis that always is going to be very electronic, but it's out of the way. It's not electronic for electronic's sake. It's like all about energy.
Exactly. No, and all those parts, they all work together. I mean, the stuff that John did, Bruce Smith, it just kind of all just fell together on that record. We actually had a second verse that we wrote. Well, I didn't write it, but we considered having a second verse. But once you add that second verse, you added so much more time to it. So I guess the decision was made to forego the second verse and get to that groove at the end.
That should have been a 12-inch right there.
Right.
It was a 12-inch. I have it.
But with that part he's talking about?
Oh, no. I have a 12-inch of the glide.
Well, you know what? Yeah, well, personally, to be honest with you, I didn't like that second verse anyway. I actually didn't like it at all. I had no attachment to it. But I tell you what, my thing is this. If you want to talk about stuff that was left on the cutting room floor, that's just something that I just don't think was like, I'll say it this way. It certainly wasn't essential because the hit speaks for itself.
Oh, yeah.
Nobody's going to say, boy, where was that second verse?
No. And you know what? And even after the record was done, I don't even think we knew what was up. I think we had an idea for a single. I think Future Now, right? We had an idea for that. We put a lot of time into that. And
yeah, I was not there for that.
Did you guys consciously decide? Did you consciously decide to sequence glide so deep into the record? Because usually a monster like that is usually further up on the.
Well, that's the thing. We didn't know, man. How can you know? We didn't know. I think what the deal was that it was so long that we it couldn't go on the first side, so we put it towards the end. And the thing is,
I actually think it really was. I'll just say it this way: it was a colossal finale, and I think that's kind of what made it. It made it approach a concept record. Is you get this fusion-esque introit of the record that Nate came up with Departure, and then you get this concept tune, Future Now. And I'm not going to get deep into it unless you want to go deep into it, but it talks about cosmology and physics and blah, 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 blah. And then it's like, but no. This is Pleasure. We've always been funky, but this is some new funk. This is some funk, conceptual, new stuff you've never heard, and it's jazzy. And we went from there to, okay, yeah, let's now just kind of like relax with the last tune on the first side. The second side, we felt like Real Thing was just meant to be it because it was gangbusters. Real Thing was gangbusters too, but it couldn't follow Glide. It couldn't, not really.
Yeah,
it couldn't. But by the time you get to Glide, it's like, okay, it's over. Why?
Well, as you're talking about too, I'm looking at it still. I'm thinking like CD sequencing now, but of course it was the first and second sides at that time.
That's exactly right.
Right, exactly.
And then from there, you got to have some kind of cruise kind of control. And I'll say it again. I can only speak for myself. Nothing to it, but it's because we really made that tune happen. I mean, and it took work to make that tune happen, to come up with how the lyrics should fall, how the background should be structured, the horns. And it's kind of, when you get to the end, it's kind of a little baby joyous ending. So that was like, okay, well, that gets us closer to the end. But I can tell you, when you get to Thoughts of Old Flame, that is one heck of a ballad. And then, it could have been switched. I can't remember, but Thoughts of Old Flame is one heck of a ballad. And by the way, I don't know if you know this, Scott, Drake contacted my brother. I don't know if it happened or not, but the rapper Drake contacted my brother to be able to use Thoughts of Old Flame as the bed music track for a rap for one of his productions. So, I mean, it just gives you a sense that, pleasure still really has a presence in our modern hip hop culture. And then it's like, okay, everybody, now we got something for you. If it weren't funky enough, if we weren't ahead of the curve enough, we want something that every bass player is going to want to learn. And it's a fun ride. It's a party tune. It's just like, just was a great finale to me.
What about the title Future Now? Did you have that in mind early on, or was that after everything was kind of done? You said
it was during the process. So I was in undergrad at the University of Washington on the way to law school, and I took a cosmology class. And back then, Carl Sagan, Cosmos was also
billions and billions. Yeah.
Yeah, there you go. And I was fascinated by the concept that light from far away, taking light years to get here, is incredibly ancient and old. So that's why you have light or life from distant planets are the stories of the future now. So I'm not going to get any more deep into the lyrics, but the whole point was, this is a deep record. This is a deep band. These are smart people. We actually had an experience reading a Rolling Stones magazine. Do you remember this, Nate? And it said, "Pleasure, just another mindless funk band."
Oh yeah.
And it was like, we were resolved to, like, we're not gonna. These people don't know anything about us. They don't know anything about who we are.
Rolling Stone seldom knew about the black and funk bands back then.
Exactly. No, we completely understood. But the whole point was, we're going to demonstrate that we are deep thinkers, deep players, and that's where Future Now really came from, because it was our first record. We got to make ourselves. Like,
well, you rose to the challenge, man. A+.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Thank you so much.
And it is as methodical as it sounds, or cerebral as it sounds. Like in retrospect, you always feel more cerebral. but most of the time, we were just trying to do the best we could. We were trying to make the best music we could. That's what we're doing. We just say we're going to do the best we can,
totally, and
have fun with it, and that's pretty much what it was. It came out to that's the result of it. I mean, for Glide and Future, all those songs, man, it was just about just trying to make some good music.
Yes.
How you been, my old friend? Come on in, it's so nice to see you. It's been years, but now you're here, and I can't believe my eyes, is it true? Been so long, you've been gone. Tell me, girl, what have you been up to?